Legislation was crafted by Democrat Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island and Republican Dean Heller of Nevada. Yesterday, it passed a key procedural hurdle. Amendments and votes are possible throughout the day. Live Senate coverage now here on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will come to order. The chaplain will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Gracious and changeless God, the creator of heavenly lights, your mercies sustain us. Today, use our senators to accomplish your will, making them faithful under trials and resolute when facing the difficult. Lord, even in sorrowing seasons, motivate them to be transformed by your liberating grace. Empower them to do the best that they are capable of, bringing a harvest of courage, compassion, and service. Give them the wisdom to place their ultimate trust in you. We pray in your holy name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., January 8, 2014, to the Senate. On the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Edward J. Markey, a senator from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Patrick J. Leahy, President pro tempore.
Mr. President.
The Majority Leader.
Following my remarks and those of the Republican leader, the Senate will resume the motion to proceed to the unemployment compensation legislation. We have no votes scheduled yet. When we are able to work something out in that regard, we will notify all Senate offices. Mr. President, yesterday's vote to advance a measure which is so vitally important to our country, to extend a lifeline to Americans who have lost their jobs during this great recession, was really a positive development. But we're a long way from restoring benefits to 1.3 million people who have been looking for work for months, some of them, Mr. President, for years. The few Republicans willing to even debate this measure have already threatened to vote against even a short-term extension unless it's fully paid for. Let me start by saying, Mr. President, I'm opposed to offsetting the cost of emergency unemployment benefits. I repeat, emergency unemployment benefits. I don't understand why my Republican colleagues can't read the script from the administration of their president, our president, President Bush. 5 times during his time in office, the second President Bush, we extended emergency employment insurance benefits by declaring it an emergency, as we should now. We should realize today there's only 1 job available for every 3 people seeking a job. Think about that. This legislation calls for a 3-month extension. That's all. So let us extend this now, give those people their benefits, and then work to see if we can come up with a long-term solution to this issue. I've heard one of the leaders in the House, one of the Republicans, say, we need to do something about opportunities for jobs. We agree. Let's see what we can come up with. But let's extend the benefits for 3 months now. Mr. President, through the darkest days of the recession, these unemployed benefits kept millions of Americans from descending into poverty. I again urge my Republican colleagues here in the Congress to pass this 3 months extension. It's what the American people want by a vast majority of all political stripes. We will need to do this so we can negotiate a long-term solution to this issue. Any lapse or delay in benefits means 1.3 million people are wondering where they're going to go to borrow money again, or to maybe see if they can figure out a way to buy baby formula, or gas for their car to go to a job interview if they're fortunate enough for a car or a bus ticket. If Republicans are so interested in paying for this measure, they should propose a reasonable way to do so that doesn't attack the Affordable Care Act or punish American children, as these two proposals they presented yesterday do. Go after American children or the Affordable Care Act. They should propose an offset that might actually pass. Instead, they proposed a string of political amendments, each more doomed to failure than the last one they offered. They should also stop masking their reluctance to extend these benefits behind complaints about how many amendments they have been allowed to offer on this and other legislation. Mr. President, everyone within the sound of my voice should understand that that is hollow. It's become a common refrain for the minority to blame their own frequent obstruction on me. 2 Republican senators held up progress on virtually everything we tried to do last Congress, the first term of this Congress. They wouldn't let any other amendments come up unless they got a vote on their amendment. The fact remains, Mr. President, if my Republican colleagues have complaints about my leadership style, they should also have complaints about Senator Frist, my predecessor. Fine man, Republican leader, we still stay in touch, as I do with the other Republican leader, Senator Lott, who I worked with very closely. I hear no complaints about their leadership style when they were leading the Senate. Mr. President, during my time as leader, Republicans have offered 7 out of 10 amendments on which the Senate has voted. 70% of the amendments we voted on here have been Republican amendments. This is a greater share than either Senator Frist or Senator Lott offered. Now, during my leadership in the 111th Congress, Mr. President, minority amendments represent a greater share of amendment votes than during any single Congress. Think about that. So Republicans should stop trying to justify their opposition to helping Americans in need with false claims about what's going on now in this institution. Let's start talking about facts rather than fiction. And there's a lot of fiction going around here. Republicans should, I repeat, stop trying to justify their opposition to helping Americans in need with false claims about my leadership. But, Mr. President, it's quite interesting to note that House Republican leaders, and I'm sure they sent a copy of it over here, House Republican leaders have instructed colleagues in a written memo. Listen to this one. Show compassion for the unemployed. I say to everyone, Mr. President, we don't need a memo for us to show compassion to the unemployed. They also say, treat them as individuals. Oh, yeah? That's not a bad idea. But it will be very difficult for Senate Republicans to seem sympathetic to the plight of the unemployed while still opposing a helping hand for 1.3 million job seekers. And it shouldn't take a memo to realize that unemployed Americans, and particularly those who have been out of work for months, deserve our compassion. We don't need a memo for that, Mr. President. A memo saying show compassion? No wonder Republicans in Congress are out of touch with Republicans around the country. Republicans around the country support extending unemployment benefits because they have compassion for those Americans who are in trouble. Being out of work is not only financially devastating, it's heartbreaking. I got a letter recently from a single mother of two who's lived in Nevada all of her life. She's afraid she'll soon be homeless. Single mother. This is what she wrote, I quote, "I have no desire to live off the system," close quote. She's speaking for virtually everyone that we're trying to help. This woman is the rule, not the exception. In order to qualify for unemployment, it's not easy. You have to be laid off through no fault of your own, and you have to actively seek work. These unemployed aren't gaming the system. There simply aren't enough jobs to go around. For every job, there's 3 people trying to get that job. And the longer a person's unemployed, the more difficult it comes to find work. This is not being made up. This is a fact. The long-term unemployed are half as likely as their recently let-go competitors to be hired. But it just doesn't stop them from trying. And rather than encouraging these people who are desperate for help to keep looking, cutting off unemployment benefits actually encourages the long-term unemployed to drop out of the job market altogether. That does not help them, and it doesn't help our communities, our states, and our country. It hurts families, it hurts communities, and certainly hurts the economy.
Mr. President.
The Republican leader.
Yesterday, the Majority Leader rejected my offer for both sides to offer amendments to the unemployment insurance bill. The way things used to work around here, we had a bill called up and we had amendments. This is sadly typical of the way things are these days here in this institution. If the Majority Leader just accepted my offer, we could actually be debating and amending this bill instead of wasting time. And how does the Majority Leader expect to achieve consensus when one side doesn't have the chance to offer any input at all? That's the way the Senate used to operate. Look, if the Majority Leader wants his bill to pass the Senate, then it's a pretty good likelihood he's going to have to find a way to pay for it. And I'll be offering one idea on that front. That is, paying for a longer extension by dropping the mandate that forces Americans to buy insurance they don't want. But if you don't like that idea, there are others. One is a bipartisan idea endorsed by the President that ensures individuals can't draw both Social Security disability benefits and unemployment benefits at the same time. Senators Coburn and Portman both have versions of that. There's another plan offered by Senator Ayotte that would cut down on fraud in refundable tax credits. And there are plans for job creation that will be offered by Senators Paul, Thune, and Inhofe. These plans take a different approach than the government-led one we see from our Democratic friends. They rely on unlocking the potential of the private sector to actually increase employment. So why don't we have a vote on them here in the Senate? I'm sure there are many Democratic ideas out there as well. But we won't get a chance to debate any of them as long as the Majority Leader keeps blocking us from offering amendments. This obstructionism by the Democratic majority is against the traditions of this body, and it needs to end. Because if Democrats truly want to get anything done this year, they're going to have to learn how to work with us. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will resume consideration of the motion to proceed to S. 1845, which the clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to the consideration of S. 845, a bill to provide for the extension of certain unemployment benefits and for other purposes.
Mr. President.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. It has been 11 days since federal unemployment insurance expired for 1.3 million Americans. And every day, more Americans lose these benefits as their 26 weeks of state benefits expire. And I hope my colleagues join Senator Heller and I in our effort to swiftly pass this 3-month extension. Many of my colleagues have talked about issues with respect to a longer-term piece of legislation, the cost of it, how should we pay for it, are there changes necessary in the program to make it more effective and efficient? Those are thoughtful and worthy considerations, but they should not deprive 1.3 million Americans and growing each day basic benefits, modest benefits, about $300 a week, that allows them to just keep their families together, keep trying to search for a job. And I would point out that the only way you qualify for this benefit is, one, you had a job, you lost it through no fault of your own, and you constantly have to keep searching for work. That's one of the requirements. It's all about work. And in this economy, it's all about the fact that there are 2 or 3 job seekers for every job. And in some parts of the country, in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Nevada, Arizona, Tennessee, states that have high unemployment, it's not just 3 to 1. In some cases, it's more. I mentioned on the floor just 2 days ago an article appeared in the Washington Post that talked about a new dairy opening up or reopening in Hagerstown, Maryland. 36 jobs. They thought there would be a large demand for the jobs. 1,600 applicants for 36 jobs, basically. That's not unique to that town in Maryland. That is, unfortunately, something that's happening all across this country. And it reflects the need to extend these benefits immediately. We have serious issues to work out, but we understand, or we should understand, that to do it carefully and thoughtfully, it requires time, it requires the attention of the experts in the relevant committees. In fact, I can recall coming down here before these benefits expired, asking unanimous consent to extend them for a year, and one of the responses and one of the objections from my colleagues on the Republican side was, well, we have to do this through the committee. We have to do this thoughtfully. We have to do this deliberately. Well, we have an opportunity to help people who desperately need help and start that deliberate process, and I hope we do that. Yesterday, we took an important step forward. We procedurally moved forward to start consideration of this legislation. And I want to thank again Senator Heller and my colleagues, all of my colleagues that joined in that vote. That's given us a chance to finish the job, but it's going to be a very difficult job to finish. I think what we can do immediately, and this might be a 2-step process, is quickly pass the Reid-Heller legislation, 90 days, unfunded, but it'll immediately put money into the economy. It'll immediately help struggling Americans who are looking for work. They have to in order to qualify for these funds. And it will help overall the economy. As the CBO has projected, if we do not fund for the year unemployment insurance, we will lose 200,000 jobs. 200,000 jobs which would be created by this program will not be created. So you'll have a double whammy. You'll still have people unemployed searching for work without any assistance, and some, in fact, will stop searching. They'll give up. And then you won't have the creation of additional jobs because of this money going into the economy and generating further demand, and further demand generating the need to keep people on and hire some more. So I hope we can finish the job that we started yesterday. It was a very important step forward. And a very important step forward not only to help individual families to, as I suggested, bolster economic demand throughout the economy. And that's going to lead to growth. I mean, I find it somewhat ironic when I hear some of my colleagues talk about, oh, you know, we really got to create jobs. Well, that's what we've got to do. Yes, we agree. But there's been so many proposals that have been presented both by the administration and by my colleagues that have not been given consideration. Creating a national infrastructure bank, which will fund through a quasi-public mechanism highway construction, bridge renovations, sewer lines, those things. That's been languishing for months and months and months and months. So we should get on with those things, I agree. But the immediate crisis is helping these 1.3 million American and growing number of Americans. And there's another reason why I think it's critical, particularly critical, to talk about the extended unemployment benefits that are the subject of our debate. We should not end this program now. As this chart indicates, long-term unemployment is much higher today than it has ever been when we terminated these benefits. April 1959, when they ended the extended benefits, it was 0.9% long-term unemployment. April 62, 0.9. 0.4 in March of 73. 0.9 in 77. 1.2% long-term unemployment in 85. 1.3 in 94. 1.3 in 03. Today, 2.6% long-term unemployment. We're in a new situation here. These could be structural market changes which are making it harder and harder for some people to find employment, even after searching desperately. And that's exactly what this program is designed to do. The state program, the initial 26 weeks, that covers people who lose their job and then relatively quickly can find other employment. This program is the one that's designed for those people, for many reasons, that have a difficulty finding a job over many, many weeks and months. And today, we're at twice the level we've ever been when we've considered cutting off these benefits. Actually, we've cut off these benefits. It was December 28th. So, for that reason alone, this issue of extended benefits has to be addressed first, I would argue, on an emergency basis. And then let's think hard and long about longer-term efforts to address this problem. Many of my colleagues have suggested issues with respect to, job training, with respect to incentives for education, all of them worthy, but they can't be done, in the context of dueling proposals on the floor. They have to be done thoughtfully. And if we can quickly adopt the Reed-Heller bill, it'll give these long-term unemployed, this record number of long-term unemployed that have been cut off from benefits, it'll give them help and give us time. Now, we've heard from countless citizens all across the country, and they come from all walks of life, from every aspect of employment. Yesterday, Senator Klobuchar released a report from the Joint Economic Committee, which was extremely well done, and which described in detail the recipients. There's no one age group. It spans the gamut. There's no one ethnic concentration. There are some geographic areas that are doing quite well, but there's areas that are doing quite badly that are scattered across the country. Rhode Island and Nevada are unfortunately leading the list of unemployment. And they are very dissimilar states, thousands of miles apart, different economies entirely. But they're caught up in this same problem of unemployment, particularly long-term unemployment. And the people who are unemployed are not sitting around passively. They're out looking every day. In Rhode Island, I've met people who they've worked for 30 years. They're in their 50s. They had good jobs. They were bookkeepers. They were white-collar professionals. They're trying to take care of an elderly parent. They have responsibilities to children. And they desperately want to work. One constituent who wrote to my office has been out of work since December of 2012. He's applied to over 300 jobs. He's taken additional classes at our local community college in the hopes of becoming a more attractive candidate for employment. Yet he remains out of work. Another constituent who has lost her benefits doesn't have enough money to pay her bills and may have to move in with her sister because she can't pay the rent. That's what's happening. This is not some academic exercise, some rhetorical, ideological debate. It's about helping real people who want to work, and they can't find the jobs after desperately looking for them. Now, a third constituent wrote me the following letter. I never thought that I would be among the unemployed, but here I am after over 30 years of experience in my field in higher education administration. I used to make $60K a year, and now my unemployment benefits run out in mid-March. I have been searching for a job not only in my field, but also doing anything possible using my transferable skills. I have not received an invitation for any of the interviews at all. So to those who say that extending benefits causes people to stay unemployed longer, they are wrong. When you lose your job, you would do anything to gain employment and regain your dignity. No one wants to subsist on unemployment compensation. Please keep up the fight for extended benefits. It has been a lifeline for me. 30 years of experience. Retraining, already undertaken. Searching relentlessly for a job. And an important point here, too, is that it's about the economics, but it's also about your dignity and your identity. I don't care who you are. A job helps define who you are. It gives you a sense of esteem and accomplishment, whether you're mopping floors or directing the operations of a huge international corporation. And for my colleagues who suggest somehow, well, you know, yeah, if you're the CEO of a company, that's really valuable work and that gives you self-esteem, they miss the point. A job well done, if it's cleaning floors or merging companies, gives the kind of satisfaction and the kind of self-respect that is critical. So this is about money, yeah, but it's also about giving people the opportunity as Americans to live out their full potential, contribute to their family, contribute to their country. Now, there are 1.3 million Americans and more each day who are facing this same dilemma. And that's why Congress needs to create jobs today and help Americans compete for jobs of tomorrow. And it means taking a multifaceted approach with things like restoring our manufacturing might by focusing on advanced technologies, ensuring local businesses have access to the capital they need to grow and expand, improving our schools and workforce training programs to ensure we have a highly educated and skilled workforce, and investing in our infrastructure. All of these things have to be done, but it's going to be very difficult to do them here in the context of this legislation. That's why, again, I urge, let's move this bill forward, let's help these people who are struggling and working very hard, and then let's put ourselves on a very fast track to deal with these issues. Manufacturing renaissance, job training. We have not reauthorized the Workforce Investment Act since 1998. That's the basic sort of education program for those adults and for people looking to move into the workforce, and the world has changed a lot since 1998. And that's a result of some, I think, indifference. And I would suggest, you know, in 1998 with a Republican Congress, in the last 2 years of the Clinton administration, from 2000 to 2006, a Republican president, a Republican Congress, we couldn't do those things. It's not a time to assess blame, but it's time to point out the situation. If we want to get these issues done, let's start moving, but let's not leave these unemployed Americans behind indefinitely without hope.
Would the Senator yield for a question?
I'd be happy to.
I'd like to direct a question to the Senator from Rhode Island through the chair. There's been a debate on the floor here, and we've heard it off the floor, about whether or not we should pay for unemployment benefits. Historically, if I'm not mistaken, most of the decisions to extend unemployment insurance benefits have been considered emergency measures and not paid for. And now there's a suggestion from many Republicans that we need to cut spending in areas to compensate for this extension of unemployment benefits, which, if I'm not mistaken, are in the range of $25, $26 billion a year. One of the suggestions yesterday from the Republican Senate leader, Mitch McConnell, would address, not surprisingly, the Affordable Care Act, so-called Obamacare, and would eliminate the basis for one of the basic protections in that law. What Senator McConnell proposed yesterday was to eliminate the responsibility of every individual to have health insurance, which was put in the law so that we could have a large pool of insured people and say to anyone with a pre-existing condition, you will not be disqualified for health insurance. So the senator from Kentucky has given us this approach that the Republicans support. If you will agree to eliminate protection in health insurance for people with pre-existing conditions, then we will allow you to give unemployment benefits. In other words, if you will eliminate this protection in health insurance for 300 million plus Americans, we will give you 1 year of unemployment benefits for 1.3 million Americans. I might add for the record that there are 1.9 million individuals with pre-existing conditions in the state of Kentucky, the state of the senator who made this proposal. So I'd like to ask the senator from Rhode Island, who has shown extraordinary leadership on this issue of unemployment benefits, first, would he address the issue of paying for these benefits? And second, would he address the specific suggestion of the Republican leader that the best way to pay for the benefits for 1.3 million unemployed people is to reduce protections in health insurance for over 300 million Americans?
Well, I thank the senator from Illinois. Let me first address the issue of paying for these benefits. The senator from Illinois is correct. Typically, these benefits are considered emergency spending, and they are not offset. In fact, the legislation that was passed in the wee hours of January 1st, 2013, as I recall, had a year extension of unemployment benefits, unpaid for. It received an overwhelming vote. I believe it was 89 to 6, huge majority of Republicans and Democrats coming together. So a year ago, this issue of must pay for was not even on the table. And by the way, I would think it probably led to the creation of, given CBO's estimates going forward, of roughly 200,000 jobs this year because it was enacted and it wasn't offset. It goes to a second point about sort of the bang for the buck. This is one of the best counter-cyclical programs we have, because when you give these benefits to individuals and you don't take other benefits, other funds out of the economy, it has a multiplier effect. Some people estimate $1.50 for every dollar we put in terms of economic activity. And it makes common sense. These funds go directly from the recipient, not to their savings account or to build up. It goes right out to buying gasoline, buying and keeping cell phone service. Oh, and by the way, today, if you don't have a car and you don't have a cell phone, you can't find a job. You can't go to the interview. You can't get the call for the interview. You can't apply online for the job. It's not 1955 anymore where you can take the bus and hand the clipboard across the barrier to the clerk with the information in. You've got to have this electronic connection to be in the workforce, as well as mobility. So from the point of view of an economic national perspective, one, yes, we typically have done these things as emergency spending. Two, you get a big bang for the buck when you do it that way, and there's a strong argument that that's probably the most sensible approach. With respect to the pay-for that the Republican leader suggested, I concur entirely with the senator from Illinois in that, one, it's the robbing Peter to pay Paul. I'm sure that not only these folks are struggling to find a job, but of the 1.3 million people who are currently receiving these benefits, I've got to assume a significant number, or at least some of them, have pre-existing conditions. For the first time, many of them are able to qualify for health care benefits. And to take this protection away for millions of Americans, you say it's 1.9 million just in Kentucky alone, it's a huge number across the country, would be bad policy, and it would, in fact, for many families, be a crushing blow. Again, I don't think we have to rob Peter to pay Paul. From an economic standpoint, we have typically done this without offsets because we want to have the economic stimulus and the demand creation that comes. But from a basic fairness point of view, we're going to go ahead and give benefits of $300 a week to people who need them. I want to do that. But we're going to pay for it by telling some families, no, guess what? You don't get insurance. Or you have to pay $25,000 a year because your child has asthma. That's not fair. It's not good common sense, and it's not good economics. So I concur. If I may resume, Madam President, we talked about sort of some of the big issues here and paying for this bill. And this is all in the context of deficit reduction, which we've made significant progress on. The Bowles-Simpson Act suggested, or I should say report, not an act, suggested that over 10 years we cut $4 trillion from the deficit. And we've achieved roughly about $2.7 trillion of that. Most of that coming from cuts to programs, not revenue increases, but cuts. And so we've made a significant progress on deficit reduction. We have to do more, but we have to do it sensibly and logically. And we have proposals that we've brought forward, and I must commend my colleagues in the Senate, and this was on a bipartisan basis. We passed an immigration reform bill, for example, on this body, and it's languishing in the House. But in that bill alone, we will, and this has been scored by CBO, we will cut over the 10-year period another $1 trillion in the deficit, which will get us to that target, very close to that target. And yet, it's languishing in the House. If we can pass that, then this issue of deficit, which has dominated and has been very important over the last several years, is something that we can practically resolve. And by the way, as I suggested in my colloquy with Senator Durbin, if we pass this legislation, that'll help too in terms of stimulating economic growth, et cetera. So there's many things we can do. But again, I go back to this point. These people are in a desperate situation, many. You know, my constituent who wrote me, 30 years of work, middle age, getting retraining, 300 applications, no interviews, looking for anything. And it's about not just, you know, dollars in a check, it's about dignity. It's about who you are. So I think we have to respond, and we have to respond quickly. And we have the opportunity to do this. And it doesn't foreclose, as we look at a longer-term effort, it doesn't foreclose, and it shouldn't foreclose, considering programmatic changes, considering if we would offset it or not. You know, in response to Senator Durbin, I pointed out, typically we don't offset this program, but we have in certain times in the past. My preference would be, frankly, is to get this bill done and then look at this issue over the longer term, you know, without preconditions. So we have to, I think, be clear. We can move this, and we should move it. Now, again, this question of offset seems to be the one that's coming up more and more. It was reflected in the Senator from Illinois' comments. But as we initiated this program under President Bush back in 2008, and the unemployment rate was roughly 5.5%, much lower than it is today, we did not ask for offsets every time. In fact, it was really the exception to the rule. And now, again, I think is not the time, particularly in this 90-day proposal that Senator Hill and I have to do that. We have worked through some difficult issues, and I commend Senator Murray and Congressman Ryan, particularly for the work on the budget. And I think we can work through this issue. So I urge, again, that we thoughtfully and very conscientiously and collaboratively work together longer term, but not ignore the crisis today, not leave 1.3 million and more Americans dangling, uncertain, desperate, frustrated, losing not only their income, but in many respects their identity and their dignity. We can do better than that for them. And then we have the time. We have the time to work constructively, collaboratively, cooperatively to come up with principled proposals to extend these benefits further, hopefully for the whole year. And with that, Madam President, I would yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Kansas.
Madam President, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here on the Senate floor this morning, and in a sense I'm intruding upon the discussion about unemployment insurance extension. But I wanted to take just a few minutes to highlight the life of a Kansan who passed in late 2013. At the end of the year, I learned of the death of a resident of Parsons, Kansas, in the southeast corner of our state. E.J. Sonny Zetmeyer was a person of such optimism and so engaged in improving the lives of other people. I wanted to highlight just for a moment and pay my respects to him and his family. The community of Parsons really lost one of its greatest champions when Sonny Zetmeyer passed away. His humor and selflessness truly made an incredible impact upon that community. Sonny had moved to Parsons, Kansas from Grandview, Missouri with his parents in 1965, and along with a company that his family owned that made cabinets. The company was called Grandview Products. And he originally agreed with his family to stay in Parsons just for a year to help get the business off the ground in its new location. But his commitment to his family, to his family's business, it just continued to grow, and he never left. He went on to purchase the company from his parents when they retired in 1982, and he helped build it into an outstanding cabinet-making business that it is today. Under his leadership, Grandview Products grew from a local small business with 24 employees to a $50 million company with 430 employees shipping cabinets from coast to coast. Today, the company is the largest employer in Parsons, and it also owns a facility in the neighboring community of Cherryvale. Sonny's legacy as a businessman is rivaled only by his commitment to his community and improving the lives of others around him. As president and CEO of Grandview Products, he cared deeply about the health and well-being of his employees and their families. Through the recession of 2008, he fought hard to keep the company's doors open and to keep as many employees as possible at work. When Grandview Products regained its footing, he worked to bring many of the former employees back to work. And even when he received the devastating cancer diagnosis that would ultimately take his life just a few weeks later, Sonny's thoughts immediately went to the well-being of his employees and their families. His wife, Sophia, relayed this story about just his final weeks. She says his number one concern was the company and its employees. It wasn't just his employees, it was the families that he was responsible for. Sonny was able to have a meeting with 216 employees. First, he announced they all got a raise so that they wouldn't be afraid for their futures. No raises had been given for 5 years because of the recession. He said, we're making money now so everybody can have a raise. Then he told them who was going to be running what department within the company, and then he told them how sick he was. But his concerns for others and selflessness extended well beyond just that business. He was passionate about Grandview Products being a locally owned company, and he felt a calling to serve the community that it was in through his service. Over the years, Sonny donated cabinets to community projects, churches and schools throughout the Parsons community. He also encouraged his employees to be charitable in whatever capacity they were able to do. In fact, Sonny was so dedicated to giving back to the local community that he'd only buy Girl Scout cookies from the Girl Scouts in his home county of Labette in Montgomery County. His service honors and achievements are numerous, but they include 2 terms as a trustee of Labette Community College and chairman of its Capital Fund campaign, 6 years as Republican County chairman in Labette County, board member of the Meadowlark Girl Scout Council, and many years as president of Parsons Area Community Foundation. Sonny was named Parsons Chamber Business Person of the Year and the Kansas State Chamber Employer of the Year in 2003. He received the Kansas Manufacturers Association Management Appreciation Award in 2007 and in 2008 he was chosen to receive the Cardinal Citation Award by Labette Community College. And since 1985, the Zetmeyers have co-sponsored the 4th of July fireworks at Marvell Park in Parsons. I've always known, I've always believed what we do here in the nation's capital is important, but the reality is that we change the world one person at a time. So while what we do in the United States Senate matters, so much more is accomplished by a person like Sonny. Sonny Zetmeyers lived the life. And by investing his time and talents and financial support into the community where he lived, he made a difference every day. His involvement in the community and his selflessness serves as an inspiration and should be a role model for every American. Sonny was married to his wife for 51 years and was a devoted father to their 3 daughters, Ellen, Joan, and Amy. And I would ask the Senate today to join me in extending our sympathies to Sonny's wife and his family as they begin this new year in the absence of their loved one. He was loved by them, and he will be greatly missed. If one's value in life is determined by whether or not you made a difference while you were here on this earth, Sonny's life was priceless. God bless him, and let him be a role model for all of us. Thank you, Madam President.
Madam President.
Senator from Massachusetts.
I seek recognition to speak on the floor.
Without objection.
Madam President, 1.3 million people already have not had a Happy New Year. That's because when we tried to extend emergency unemployment insurance before the holidays, the Republican leadership said no. The temperatures may be dropping to new lows, but we shouldn't freeze unemployment benefits. When the economy was collapsing and AIG, the multinational insurance company, needed funds, we found that money for AIG. But when the Americans who are still recovering from the very recession caused by these institutions need more unemployment insurance, we just can't seem to find a way to get it done. And these aren't just numbers. These people, 1.3 million people across the country, and 60,000 in my home state of Massachusetts, they now face the harsh reality in 2014 that their country no longer has their backs. Mr. President, one of these people is named Vera Volk. She's from Lynn, Massachusetts, just north of Boston. She is a 20-year employee in the biotech pharmaceutical industry who was laid off in May of 2013. Her layoff was in part due to sequestration cuts in federal funding of biotech last year. Last month, Vera lost her unemployment benefits when the emergency unemployment insurance program ended. Vera has suffered a double injustice. First, her job was eliminated through sequestration, and then she was denied the extension of her unemployment benefits. Without the additional unemployment insurance, Vera and her family now need help to obtain food and medical assistance. In the near future, Vera's family faces the loss of their car, their home. Thousands of families in Massachusetts are facing similar but equally difficult decisions due to the termination of this critical program. Published reports say that unemployment insurance kept 2.5 million Americans, including 600,000 children, out of poverty last year alone. That is why I am a co-sponsor of the Emergency Unemployment Compensation Extension Act that Senators Reid and Heller have introduced to reinstate and continue federal support for emergency unemployment insurance program until the end of March. And under that legislation, Vera Volk would be eligible to receive up to 35 weeks of additional unemployment benefits. Today, there are approximately 11.3 million Americans out of work and looking for a job. In Massachusetts, the unemployment rate is 7.1%, and approximately 245,000 are looking for work. Unfortunately, in too many cities, Lawrence, New Bedford, Springfield, all over Massachusetts, there are cities with much higher unemployment rates. And those unemployed workers in Massachusetts
and across this country, they're finding it extremely difficult to find a job in this market. According to the Economic Policy Institute, for every one job opening, there are 3.1 unemployed workers. So 2 out of every 3 job seekers have no job that they can actually find. And yet we're going to pretend that there is a job for them to be able to find. There are many people who believe they're not working hard enough to find a job. Well, let me tell you something. Back in 2000, the unemployment rate in the United States of America went down to 3.8%. And guess what happened? People who were unemployed took those jobs. When unemployment goes down to 3.8%, when the government and the private sector is doing their job, people come to work. In Massachusetts in 2000, unemployment went down to 2.8%. People weren't hiding under their beds. People weren't pretending they couldn't work. When the job was there, people took it. This isn't ancient history. This is 2000. 3.8% unemployment. 2.8% unemployment for the state of Massachusetts. People who are offered a job will take a job. The jobs are not there. It is not the fault of these families. It is not the fault of these job seekers. We should not be punishing them. We should not be punishing their families because this capitalist system is not producing the jobs right now. We have to reach out with a helping hand to these families so they can make it through this difficult time where the system is failing them. And instead, we're going to blame them for not finding jobs that do not exist. And it's a beautiful circular argument where you never have to help the people who are actually being victimized by a failure in the economy. But the truth is, and again I restate this, when it went down to 3.8% unemployment in 2000, employers called these people back and said, we want to put you to work, and the workers said, yes, we're ready to do it. And so here we are, once again, back in this cycle where too many people are pointing the finger at the worker when we know the worker will do the job. We have to just be honest about this. The system, this capitalist system, this interaction between the government and capitalism right now is not producing the jobs for these workers. We have to work on that. That's our responsibility. We should be humble enough to say that it is the government, it is the private sector not working together smarter, not harder, in order to accomplish these goals for all those workers across our country. Now, if we did that, I think that ultimately we would have the very interesting result, according to all economists, of actually injecting more funding into the economy, creating more jobs, not destroying an additional 200 or 300 jobs this year because we didn't inject the funding that would be provided to these unemployed that then would be spent on the economy that would keep it more on the upward tick that it's now on right now. And instead, again, paradoxically, we're going to wind up with the Republicans, if they're successful, in cutting off this funding for long-term unemployment and seeing unemployment actually continue to rise instead of being lowered. We have to work together in a bipartisan fashion in order to make smart investments now that will create jobs, continue our country's economic recovery, lower unemployment, and I believe that our national strategy for job growth must continue to emphasize the areas where we excel as a nation. That's education, it's healthcare, it's biotech, it's clean tech, it's technology in general, and the investment into these areas that continue to give us the opportunity to be an engine for job growth in the world. But while we chase this dawn of a brighter economy, we must not leave behind millions of Americans and their families. So let's not punish those who are the victims and continue to be the victims of a Wall Street collapse, because we, as a nation, have to understand and identify these innocent victims who still sit out there with their families. I hope that we can come together on a bipartisan basis to continue this program that is such a lifeline to the unemployed, their families, and our economy. And I yield back the balance of my time. Madam President, I have 3 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders. I ask unanimous consent that these requests be agreed to and that these requests be printed in the record.
Without objection.
Madam President.
Senator from Missouri.
Madam President, first of all, on the business before us today, we want to be sure and continue to remember that if you are unemployed, if you do lose your job today or tomorrow or next week, in every state you immediately qualify for 6 months of unemployment. In states that have high unemployment, you immediately qualify for additional 13 to 20 weeks. There are really 2 different debates going on here today. One is this really a long-term plan or a long-term policy? If I would suggest, Madam President, if this Congress and the administration spent the kind of effort and time on what it takes to create private sector jobs or encourage an environment where that happens, we'd be spending our time much more wisely than we are continuing to perpetuate a program that the majority would suggest shouldn't even be paid for, and many would suggest is just not a program at all. Now, other things that are affecting our economy is why I came to the floor today, and there are a number of them, from constant talking about more taxes to higher utility bills to more regulation to obviously this overwhelming discussion about health care. I noticed the majority leader this weekend said that roughly 1/3 of all the people that have been added to the insured rolls because of the Affordable Health Care Act were because of a bill I introduced in 2009 that would allow dependents or children to stay on their family policies longer. Now, I was the only one, Madam President, that introduced that bill in the House. I don't think it was introduced in the Senate. I thought it was a good idea then. I think it's a good idea now. And apparently, it's such a good idea that 1/3 of all the people that have insurance that didn't have insurance before are just because of that bill. I've got the bill before me. It was House Resolution 3887. It's 1, 2, 3.5 pages. That could have passed by itself, not 2,700 pages, 3.5 pages that would have added 1/3 of all the people the majority leader of the Senate said have been added because of the Affordable Health Care Act. No taxpayer money involved. 3.5 pages that wouldn't have disrupted anybody else's insurance. There were other solutions out there that would have made a lot more sense. You know, I'm tired of hearing from the administration that nobody else had any other ideas. Apparently my idea was 1/3 of all the people that have been added to insurance, according to the majority leader. So apparently I had 1/3 of all the ideas, and they were in 3.5 legislative pages with no taxpayer cost. Just as I suspect is the case with every senator, I'm getting letters, postings on our Facebook page, contacts through all of the social media every day from Missourians who are saying that this is just not working out like they thought it was going to work out. At Ozarks Technical Community College in Springfield, Missouri, my hometown, the adjunct faculty there, as is the case in many community colleges, has taught an awful lot of the courses. I think about 58% of the courses taught are taught by not full-time faculty members, but part-time faculty members. The problem is those faculty members are now more part-time than they were before. Many of them were teaching 30 credit hours per year prior to this year, but largely because of the Affordable Care Act, they're now teaching 24 credit hours. So they lost that percentage of their work, that percentage of their pay, that percentage of their ability to work with and be dedicated to students. According to the Springfield newspaper, the Affordable Care Act is one of the reasons that those faculty members, 58% of all the credit hours taught by people, many of whom were teaching 30 credit hours, now teaching 24 credit hours. And there's only one reason that they're working 24 hours a week instead of 30, and that's because 30 is the point where benefits
according to the Affordable Care Act, have to be offered at a level that is defined by the Affordable Care Act, not defined by the community college. In fact, some community colleges in America, I'm sure, gave some benefits before for people who were part of the adjunct faculty, just not the benefits that the federal government appears to think are absolutely necessary. Let me just go through a few of the people that have reached out to our office in recent days. Jeffrey at Blue Springs, Missouri, is a small business owner who offers health care benefits to his employees, but what Jeffrey says is, quote, it feels like a bait and switch. Get everyone to drop the coverage they liked and then stick it to them once company-provided health care is no longer available. I'm asking people when I'm home, as I was so much of the break that we just had, what are you doing with your health care? And employer after employer who doesn't have 50 employees, who isn't impacted by this, is just saying, I think the government is about to take this over, and before they get in, I'm getting out. The 12 people at the dentist office, the 36 people at the radio station, either losing their health care this January 1 or already know they're going to lose it next January 1, and the only reason is the so-called Affordable Health Care Act. Marcia at Avaz, Missouri, has 3 children, all under the age of 5. Her husband's employer has been informed that because of Obamacare, they'll have to absorb more than $1 million in order to keep providing insurance for their employees. Now, the employer is still trying to do that, but the coverage isn't what it was. The deductible's higher than it was, and one of the messages is we may not be able to do this much longer. Sabra at Purdy, Missouri, and her husband were notified that they'll lose their health care and did lose their health care on December 31 because of the Health Care Act. She says, we live on less than $14,000. Now we're at a point where we have to make a choice. Food, medication, both of which I can no longer afford, but we don't have health care any longer. Teresa at Joplin, Missouri's husband lost his coverage on December 31. When she tried to sign up for at healthcare.gov, she was told they were ineligible because they were incarcerated. Turns out neither of them have ever been arrested or incarcerated at all, but they were ineligible because they were incarcerated. I guess the greater point there is he lost his health care. She wouldn't have had to be on healthcare.gov and find out that, much to her surprise, the government believes she's incarcerated if her husband hadn't lost his health care at work. Melanie from St. Charles, Missouri, is a single mother of 3. Her employers cut her hours because, again, of Obamacare. She is no longer able to work more than 28 hours a week and had to find 2 additional part-time jobs to make up for the job she lost. Here's what she says. She says, I feel like the government is working against me, and I'm the person they say they're trying to help, according to Melanie at St. Charles, Missouri. Jean in St. Louis says her insurance was canceled because of the president's health care plan. The most similar plan she could find in the exchange, similar to the one she had before, cost $775 per month, more than double what she was paying before the Affordable Health Care Act. She says, why did we break a health care system that allowed people to find what they needed instead of just government deciding what you need? Jefferson City Schools in the state capital in our state says that the health care plan will cost their school district $150,000. They're not having to pay insurance for substitute teachers that they didn't pay before. Now, there are people, I'm sure, listening to this will think, well, that's fine. They're paying for substitute teachers. But many of those substitute teachers are no longer are allowed to work 30 hours in school districts all over America. And others are in districts like this one where it just cost $150,000 more than it did. Now, the district officials in the article I read didn't go as far as to say the federal government is hurting more than it's helping, but they did point out that $150,000 is about 3 teachers. 3 full-time teachers that they won't hire that they might have been able to hire otherwise. Barbara in Novinger, Missouri says that her husband and she no longer have health care. For the first time in 50 years, my husband and I do not have health care. My hours have been reduced from 40 to 28 a week, and they eliminated my insurance at work because they don't have to give it to me anymore. You know, interestingly, employers that for years provided insurance because they thought it was the right thing to do and the competitive thing to do, take a different view of this when the government begins to tell you what you have to do. I think it's one of the most interesting applications of the health care law. When the government begins to tell you what you have to do, then suddenly it's okay not to do anything except what you have to do. And how do you meet that criteria? How do you draw that line? You have people work less than 30 hours. You don't create new jobs. You outsource your work. Let me give you 3 or 4 more examples as I finish up here with my time on the floor. Sandra in Springfield is upset that her health care plan will require them to have pediatric dentistry and maternity care. She says, I'm upset that my health plan will require my husband and I to have pediatric dentistry and maternity care that we simply do not need. I don't know how many letters all of us have received like that. These benefits, there's supposedly better insurance than you had for a whole lot of people are just simply benefits you don't need. So suddenly you're paying for benefits you don't need, and people who don't have insurance can get insurance once they get sick. How is that supposed to make any kind of economic sense or health care sense? Mark in Chesterfield, Missouri says his plan was canceled because his plan, back to my point I suppose, his plan didn't meet the requirements of the President's health care plan. Here's what he says, my current plan will no longer be offered after December of 2014. This is a direct contradiction to President Obama's promise that I could keep my plan if I liked it. You know, some people lost their insurance on December 31 of last year. Other people have already been told they're going to lose their insurance December 31 of next year. And here from West Plains, somebody who works at the Ozarks Medical Center says, we are a sole community provider with the closest hospital providing the same level of care to be over 100 miles away. The loss of the health care system that we've had will devastate the economics of this community and surrounding communities. What we're going to find here, Madam President, is a system that is not designed to meet the needs of the people of the country. What we could have done is give them more choices to figure out what they needed to meet their needs instead of coming up with a system that just simply is going to leave so many people that had insurance 2 years ago without insurance 2 years from now. Surely that wasn't the goal, but the people had better wake up in this chamber and in Washington, D.C. and figure out whether that was the goal or not. It's going to be the result if we don't do something about it. And the best thing to do about it would be start over now that we've learned all we've learned over the last 4 years and make the changes to the best health care system in the world that will make it even better and work for more people. And I would yield the floor. And if I need to ask for a quorum here, or I'll yield the floor.
If the senator will withhold the request, Madam President, I'd ask for recognition.
The Republican whip.